Hello everyone, thank you very much for coming. I have travelled all the way from the big city of, well, actually it's a small town of Newquay, to be here today. If you don't know, hopefully you would, I'm Florence Bate, this is me. I'm also known as Floss, so if I refer to myself in third person as Floss, it's not someone else. But I have actually pulled together. So here we are, this is what we're talking about today. What to include in your PR press kit and how to build it. I thought I'd start off, although I've kind of already done a little introduction, but just about me. This is actually the star of the show. This is my dog Ludo, who I like to roll out at every opportunity. He makes a very welcome break on my Instagram quite a lot. But yeah, I am a PR specialist based in Cornwall. I have been in PR for over 8 years now. I started in London doing luxury travel PR. I then got headhunted for a job in Truro, where I worked on luxury travel, but also some food, some drink, and some very odd things in between, some dog food, and a mattress company. So I feel like I've kind of spanned quite a lot of industries. Sadly, I was made redundant in the pandemic, and then, although actually looking back, probably not that sad. So if anyone's newly self-employed, which I know there might be a few in the room, it's all right, it does happen. I did have a weekend of crying and telling my mum that going self-employed was a really stupid idea in the middle of the pandemic. But we're here, I'm here to live the tale. This is just a bit of background, but I've been named twice as one of Cornwall's 30 under 30. Didn't go for it this year, so I am keeping myself at 2. But yeah, I essentially have been doing this in my sleep for quite a few years now, and in different sectors as well. So as I said, consumer, so kind of mattress brands, dog food, drink, but also in professional services. So one of my biggest clients is an accountancy firm, and I look after, they're actually based in Norway, very odd. But I have a range of experience. So let's get into it. What is a press kit? So I don't want to teach anyone to suck eggs, but equally it's actually really important that we all cover this off in the beginning, because otherwise we're never going to know. Ironically, there isn't an Oxford definition, so I have to go with the Cambridge definition. But a press kit is a set of information that is given to journalists, who are people who write reports for newspapers, television, etc., to make them aware of a product or service or of a company or organisation. So when you think of a press kit, it's actually kind of everything that you need for a journalist. This is where my animation on this didn't work, so we pretend that you can only see one at a time. So what is in a press kit? So here we have 8 very important things to keep in a press kit, and it really depends as well. What I'm going to say is if you're a service or if you're a product, because obviously you'll want different things. Also, you don't feel like you have to scribble these all down. I've done a classic me. There's actually a downloadable file on my website that you can get all this from. So don't worry. Yeah, if you're more than welcome to, but don't panic if you don't get everything. So what is in a press kit? The most important thing and the first thing that should come first, and I think we'll probably hear the words elevator pitch quite a lot today, but your elevator pitch, which is basically who, what, where, when, how. So all of the really crucial information that you're going to need to sell your product, your service. Hopefully it distills down into about 2 lines. That's my favourite kind of elevator pitch. But yeah, it's kind of the really, really nitty-gritty information. So what you really, really need to know. Once you've got your elevator pitch, I'm guessing, sometimes people do kind of research on their audience, which does help. But yeah, here we've got audience strategy. So distilling who your audience are, and it's amazing how many people just be like, oh, it's a yummy mummy, she's 40 and she's got 2 kids, and she lives in London, but she holidays in Cornwall. I've heard that so many times. Chances are it's probably not a yummy mummy that's got 2 kids and holidays in Cornwall. It's probably someone that you wouldn't even have thought about, but unless you know who your ideal customer is and who there's a difference as well with your ideal customer and who actually buys your product or your service. And let's not forget that, because I think quite often people are really, really snobby about who they think their customer is. And then I actually did I worked with the Scarlet in Cornwall, the luxury spa hotel, and they did a little recce to see, you know, if you're in a posh hotel, you get which newspapers you want to pick. Their most requested newspapers were the Daily Mail and the Sun, and I loved it because I was like, all they wanted to do was be in the Financial Times, and I was like, it's not what you want. But yeah, a lot of also on this audience strategy, really getting to understand the audience. One of the most important things for me is understanding that your consumer or your customer is business. Let's call them Flora. Business Flora Monday to Friday, and then mum Flora maybe in the evenings, and then, you know, consumer someone else Saturday to Sunday. So actually they've got quite a few profiles, and it's about hitting them with information in a variety of different profiles. So yes, they might read Southwest Business Insider in their Monday to Friday job, but they also might flick through Grazia at the weekend, and they might, you know, a classic is a banker in London. Ironically, my brother is a classic of this, but he reads the Financial Times, because that's what bankers in London do, Monday to Friday, and then he actually picks up the iWeekend at the weekend, which is just two titles which you would never put together from a media perspective. But yeah, and also the Sun has one of the biggest targets of bankers in the world, because they just want to flick through stuff instead of kind of reading stocks and shares. So yeah, audience strategy, making sure that you're understanding that what your audience does, kind of what your ideal customer does, is business, but also consumer. And then you get a variety of, you get a real variety then of who you're talking to and actually what you're getting down to. So once you understood kind of who you're talking to in terms of whether they are a yummy mummy who holidays in Cornwall, or whether they are a banker from Manchester. And the geography is very important as well. I'm not being really, really stereotypical. It is really important that you target the right people in the right area about the right thing. This is where it comes down to target titles. When I pull together a press kit for any of my clients, everyone always rolls their eyes at the first month, which is like, client admin, about 17 hours. But this is so important. So then distilling down, and I do it in an A-star to C list. So we've got kind of our A-star titles, and we work our way down, and I would recommend doing that, because then you really understand who your targets are. But starting from kind of the gold tier, who you really, really want to hit. A-star for me is always, they're the ones that I probably know I won't get into. Financial Times does feature a lot, but would love to, and it would be a huge win if I did. And it's, you know, communicating that to clients or to board members is important as well, because it's not always that you get into your A-stars. That's kind of like, that would be ideal, and then distilling it down. And it depends as well on what you're after. I would say not to completely block out a title if their circulation is low, because it just might mean that it's more targeted. So for example, Business Cornwall, sorry, it's very Cornish-led, but Business Cornwall is one of our only trade titles in Cornwall, and therefore, yeah, the circulation isn't huge, but actually, if it's the only one that's talking to a business audience in Cornwall, why wouldn't we pitch for it? And actually, it's great to, and a lot of the time they feature in kind of A-list, and people are always so snobby about it. I'm like, no, it's a really great publication, but the numbers just aren't there. And yeah, and it dependent on your audience as well. It depends how you get to in terms of where you want to be seen and what constitutes as a real win. So some of them might not be obvious, is what I will say. And yeah, once you've kind of got them for an A-star to C, then you can kind of still look at circulation, look at where that will get you. Also worth noting that in target titles, a lot of consumer press actually start by looking at trade press for angles. So don't ever undermine the importance of trade press. So for example, the grocer, the caterer, all of their stories normally feed back into the Times, the Telegraph, all the nationals, nearly all of the consumer titles. So making sure that you give trade little ego stroke, because they are normally the poorer sibling, but making sure that they know stuff first is a really good way of actually encouraging journalists to write about you, because then they've got credibility as well. Once we've gone from target title, so now you've got this nice A star to C slot, A star to C list, you look at relevant slots, and this is something that I've heard so many PR agencies just basically BCC emails, which is my worst nightmare. But there are a lot of people, sadly, that do PR really awfully and literally just, or don't even BCC, just CC, and that's GDPR nightmare, which has happened quite recently. But making sure that you kind of are actually targeting people and targeting the slots and the journalists that will genuinely write about you. A great anecdote at the moment is that I'm selling in a sauna on the cliffs of Watergate Bay, which is incredible. However, monkeypox was apparently started in an adult sauna. So it's actually really awful timing to sell a sauna in. But because I'm going to the relevant slots, I'm not going to kind of the news pages of the Times, because that is all they're writing about at the moment. I'm going to kind of the consumer online kind of roundup slots. It's doing well, thank goodness, because I did have to have a little crisis comm session on that. But yeah, so targeting relevant slots. So if it's a profile of a founder, so, you know, if you've got a really big business story to tell and you want to, you've got, let's just come up with a little case study. We've got a business, they're about to expand into China. They've just turned over 8 million. The CEO used to be a banker and is now CEO of a lovely crisp company. The fact that they've got numbers always helps in kind of financial figures, always helps in profile slots, but also it means that we can sell these in. That story of a founder and, you know, that they used to be a banker and now this kind of passion project, it's never going to fly in GQ. So let's think about where that needs to sit. That probably needs to sit in trade titles or the business pages of newspapers, mainly trade. Online print, there's very little difference now, I'd say. There's a lot of kind of kind of like Readly and Press Reader. I don't know if anyone's heard of them, but essentially websites, subscriptions where you can just look at loads of magazines. Readly is amazing if you haven't got it. You can literally read every magazine for like $7.99 a month. But yeah, so we've got this founder and they've got a really great story, but this expansion into China is key because they're actually, although they're based in Devon, they want to go abroad and they want to target the market and they want to be there press ready before they actually launch. So Insider, which is not Southwest Business Insider, but Insider is a global publication. It has global unique users daily of like 200 million. Looking at the slots there, looking at who they've written about, looking at what they need for the story, and just doing your research on the relevant slots will absolutely hold you up there, because otherwise journalists get thousands of press releases a day, and it's quite scary. I went to the GQ Food and Drink Awards a couple of weeks ago and spoke to the old associate editor of GQ. And I was like, Paul, how many emails do you get? I think I get a fair few with clients and various different alerts. And he was like, I, on average, would get 2,300 emails a day. So that's just an insane amount of stuff. And if you're just kind of pitching stuff out every day, BCCing, if there's no relevance in the subject line or the first line, it's a delete, and that is ultimately what he said. It's just not worth it, and also it does damage your reputation, I would say, as well. People, I've spoken to a lot of journalists in my time, and they all say, you know, if you can include at least a first name and a title, like that's better than good afternoon. So yeah, that's a key one. Once you've got the relevant slots, talking to the relevant journalists, making sure that they are definitely going to write about what you're thinking about. And another thing that I do quite regularly is just put, so for example, for the sauna, I just Google Boolean search sauna to see who was writing about it. And I've done all my press lists, but it's just keeping on top of the news agenda to make sure that that's relevant. So now we've kind of sorted out our target media, distilling down into the elevator pitch. So award wins are a very tricky angle in PR. I will forever say that I'm not going to sell in a press release about a business award for your company, and every CEO rolls their eyes and gets really annoyed, but no one wants to write about it, and I'm really sorry, I know it's horrible, but there are a couple of trade titles, but you're not gonna, unless it's a really well-recognised award, or what happens a lot of the time is that it's Southwest Business Insider Awards or GQ Food and Drink Awards, so in which case that publication will write about it, but for GQ, Esquire is their kind of biggest competitor. Esquire aren't going to write about the GQ Food and Drink Awards. So just thinking about that and making sure that that's really aware. Having said that, it's really important to keep it in your press kit, just in it within other information, just not as a kind of core point, because it gives you credibility, and also your teams or your service or whoever it is have probably worked really hard, and actually, you know, getting that credibility is really important for the company, and it's really important for, you know, that credibility, but making sure that it's amongst other things. Yeah, award wins are something that I fall out with my clients on nearly every week, and I have to keep saying, you know, we can do one or two, but we could, if it's like very, very great, but if not, no. Press-ready images, something, again, that a lot of people don't really understand what press-ready means. So press-ready is above 1 megabyte. So that's kind of size-wise what you need. I'd always say landscape and portrait, branded, and most importantly, non-branded. Again, it kind of feels counterintuitive, but what we've got to remember with PR is that it's editorial, so it's editorial discretion. You're not paying for this, nothing is guaranteed, and therefore, if it was a branded image, it's advertising, and that is the cutthroat way of what advertising teams see. The minute they see a branded image, you'll have the advertising team, believe you me, on your back, asking if there's budget. And there never is. So yeah, press-ready images, branded and non-branded, are really important. Case studies. Now this is one mainly for professional services. I don't know, put your hands up if you're in professional services. Okay, great. So professional services, we tend to do this quite a lot. So for example, my accountancy firm deals buyouts, management buyouts, all of that kind of thing. They are great for this. And to have a third person beyond your company being able to say how great you are on your behalf without paying them is phenomenal. So case studies in terms of what it depends, obviously, the industry that you're in, but so for the accountancy firm that I'm talking about, making sure that we have sign-off from the person to be a case study is arguably the most important. And people laugh, but genuinely this happened to me before Christmas, where I signed something off and they're like, we didn't realise we were going to press. I've spent 4 months trying to tell you this, but making sure that there's written confirmation on that. And yeah, ensuring that they're happy that they've got a press-ready image of themselves, or if it's a deal, a press-ready image of them and hopefully the person they're doing the deal with, because otherwise that kind of is, yeah, what's the point? And these, as I said earlier, they can really add to kind of, you know, making sure that it's an endorsement, isn't it, a case study, essentially. And an endorsement is brilliant when it's really great, but also the client will have to get something out of it as well, and that's something that I'm really conscious of, especially in professional services. They want to also see their name check. So making sure that they've kind of signed off all the wording, again, is a real watch out for case studies. Yeah, ensuring that they're happy to kind of go ahead with it, and to include things like any fun facts. I mean, fun being obviously not always, but just facts that are financial, staff count as well. That's always quite a good one for case studies. If there's a growth story in it, and how said service helped them get to this point is really important as well. Yeah, and including them, as I said, kind of at the bottom as well. A lot of the time we can do, so for example, do a press release about a management buyout, or actually just a merger and acquisition, and the whole release is about that merger and acquisition at the bottom, just saying, more information on set X and X is available. So it doesn't always have to be kind of the main part of the release, but important to including a press kit. And then lastly on this slide, sorry, I'm really sad that my nice animations I did work quite a lot of time on little shutter effects on each side, but sadly they are not. Contact and spokespeople. There's no point in having a press kit if you don't have a contact. I'm really aware that people move around quite a lot, and therefore people aren't always on hand. Would always recommend it not being the CEO on the contact and spokespeople, because most often they're not the best person for the press to contact. And that moves me quite swiftly. Oh, okay, hold that thought. But there's some more coming. So how do you use it? So you've compiled this press kit, which has all of the above on it. How to use it. Regularly update to include key stats and company updates. So I don't know if anyone's heard of Glossier, but their CEO has just stepped down. She's now moving to more of a founder position. I can guarantee you that the first thing that press team did was go through their press kit, take Emily out of CEO, out of the spokesperson, because she's now kind of almost a backseater, but put whoever now is the most relevant spokesperson in. So yeah, key updates. Again, if an award, for example, the Queen's Enterprise Award for Business is one of the kind of more recognised awards, so I did do a regional sell-in on it, but that is valid for 5 years. So after that 5 years is over, you need to take that out of the press kit. So making sure that you're really on top of it. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to be a weekly update. Well, I hope not anyway. I hope no one's changing that fast. But making sure that you're just keeping an eye on things that you might take for granted as kind of being part of your company profile. Only share relevant information. So press kits can be like 6 pages long, and no journalist is going to read 6 pages of company waffle. A lot of the time there is quite a lot of, catchphrases from the business, which is just never going to work in press. Press is very much kind of, it's what you read every day. So if you're only sharing relevant information, you're much more likely to get a quick response and for them. But this press kit works that if they then need anything else, you can just be like, oh yeah, I'll pull that out. So it works quite well in that sense of, only sharing relevant, but also it's all there. And then as part of your brand guidelines, I feel like this is kind of a wider thing, and having now gone self-employed and worked at a great agency, but we had a really, really stringent kind of starting process. So kind of everyone was inducted and you had kind of guidelines that do's and don'ts. And actually a press kit works so well in this, because if this is the information that you're about to give the media directly, why should all of your employees not know about this? And it helps them also learn more about the brand, stuff that you might think that they don't really need to know. But equally, if they're at an event like this and then they get asked something, but they've read, hopefully this, let's hope, then they're better versed to be up to date and interested and kind of feel more included in the brand as well. So brand guidelines in terms of yes and no's for social, for example, this feeds in as part of it quite a lot of the time, but also just for your employees. Watch outs. I feel like I've given a few watch outs, but yeah, without having too much of a crisis, comms head on. Ensure it's in a PDF file if you're sharing it externally. This is so that information doesn't get changed. And I don't mean to be cynical, but we have all worked with the Daily Mail, and we do all know that sometimes things like that don't always float. And So yeah, make sure that it's in a PDF file. So you can just take stuff out, set it into a new Word document. So take what you need from your press kit, put it in a Word document, PDF it. It's quite straightforward, but it really, really saves you. Yeah, especially if people do like to play with numbers, which is great. HD, as I said, over 1 megabyte in a timeless format. WeTransfer can be brilliant. However, people quite often when you're doing a big sell-in, journalists just actually file stuff. If it's not relevant for what they're actually working on at the moment, they'll file stuff. If they then are on deadline, can't just searching through their emails, they get a pitch and there's a WeTransfer link. They get so irate because they can't download that. That went 7 days ago. Great if you're posh and you've got a WeTransfer Pro account and it lasts forever. But my favorite format is Dropbox. So kind of upgrading your Dropbox and then having this kind of, as I say, timeless format, which just means that you can click back in and also you can edit it, which is brilliant because if someone decides that they don't actually like an image, it's changeable and it still leads to the same link. The final watch out is your spokesperson media trained, and this brings me out in hives. I am also a crisis comm specialist, which is my brother always laughs, but I really have seen some horrific displays of people being a spokesperson for the business and actually having no fucking idea what they're talking about. So yeah, is your spokesperson media trained? Do they actually know A, what they're talking about, B, who they're talking to, see who their audience is and what they need to cover off, because there is a lot of ramble in a lot of media pitches, and it's not great. Media training can be really expensive, but it's so worthwhile, especially for those CEOs who kind of are slightly at arm's distance from the business, because once they know what they're talking about, they'll just feel more comfortable, and there's nothing worse than watching an interview back. I actually really hate public speaking, which is really ironic, but I have done quite a lot of public speaking training and media training as well, training my clients, and they feel so much more confident once they know that actually the media aren't going to bite. Most of the time, they're not trying to get a really nasty story. But until they've been taught that by normally a third party, because they'll never listen to someone in-house, which is why media training is always outsourced. They won't open up and they won't be personable. They probably will actually just ramble and panic. So yeah. Please make sure that your spokesperson is media trained. Also, it's less embarrassing. And I think I've actually nailed the timing on this. So we're off to questions, if anyone has any. Yeah. There we are. Oh. That's mute. Yeah, there we are.
Brilliant.
Questions? Yeah.
I don't know if it's best just for the film. Do we need the microphone for the recording or not? Okay, because we got told in the last lecture that we needed it. I have no idea. This is the first one. Yes, it does.
So thank you, that was really, really helpful. I work for myself and it's just me, and I'm targeting professional services firms. So part of my strategy going forward is trying to get more PR in publications like Accountancy Age and things like that. What would you advise is the best kind of first pitch, if you like, to sort of get in with those journalists? So, you know, what should you say in your first approach to them?
So I think if you've got a news story, that's always helpful. So if you've signed a new client, sometimes that kind of is depending on who the client is. It's kind of like a pie in the sky kind of thing. How long is a piece of string? So if you've got a really heavyweight new client, that always really helps. Sometimes, and this I think anyone in PR will probably cringe when I say this, but a lot of the publications that you're talking about, and I know them well, do a lot of advertorial, which is adverts and editorial. And sadly, that is the way that a lot of editorial is going at the moment, just with the pinch of the pandemic as well. I mean, I sit more in travel press more than any industry, but making sure that you are kind of kept up to date of what those advertorial options are, because sometimes you can then weave a story in to be editorial when they're covering advertorial. So that's kind of an insider tip, is what I would always say. Always ask for their advertising schedules or kind of what the forward features. And that's another thing, is that in terms of your first pitch, they're not going to know it's your first pitch. I hate to break it to you, but as I said, they get so many emails a day. So actually I would kind of take a step back and not even think about what the angle or anything is. I would actually take a step back and look at the slots and look at where you could add value to the slots. And then think from there, and think if you've got any interesting case studies to add to it. If there's any, as I said, case studies, but also kind of deals, anything like that you can add, and hopefully, does that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great. Fine. Yeah, because I suppose mine is more around practice, like growing your practice rather than the technical side of accounting. So yeah, that would be the ideal slot, I think. So.
Yeah, and just as I say, Accountancy Age and Accounting Stern, all the rest of it. Just look at what they're churning out and see, and that will give you a good indication as to, if you know your target media, then you kind of you're one step ahead of most people, because they'll just fire out a blanket release. But yeah, just then going through that.
Brilliant. Thank you.
That's right.
Lisa, question?
This will be a quick one, I think. Obviously, when you're emailing press releases, the subject header is key. Do you actually put press release in your subject header, or do you just come up with some quirky subject?
I don't ever put press release, because why would anyone want to know it's a press release? That's horrible. No, normally if it's news, I'll put new. It's just grabbing attention. I do love a pun in a headline, but no one ever opens it, because they're like, well, that could be anything. So if it's new, I always put new at the beginning, but I would never put press release. And that works across trade and consumer as well. They know it's a press release. But if you're using like 11 characters to tell them it's a press release, it's just going to get deleted.
Hi, I'm Laura. Nice to meet you. And that was brilliant, thank you. In the kind of body of an email pitch, you were saying if you're finding relevant slots, do you tell the journalist you think you'd be a good fit for X, Y, and Z? Like, do you need to be quite specific?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So when I say relevant slots, literally, and that works for the subject line as well. If there is an actual slot, I would put it in the subject line, like XX for XX slot, because they know that you've done your due diligence, and that means that they're probably, especially if they're doing a search of their emails, I would like to jazz it up and make it like Devil Wears Prada, what PR is, but it's actually really not. A lot of journalists are just slogging at their computers, searching their emails. So make sure that you're in your emails, putting it in there, because then if they come to commission a slot and they're looking for that particular relevant thing, they'll pull it into a folder, and then they can just search it and it will be there. So absolutely, in headline and in body.
Quick supplementary question.
If
it is a press release, do you bother attaching a press release, or is it just, again, do you just go with like a couple of key paragraphs?
So I will pull out the relevant slots in the top, and then I would copy and paste. I never attach, because again, a lot of journalists actually now remove all attachments from their emails because they get so many. So I literally just copy and paste it into the body of an email, but just below my actual pitch. So there's more information there if they need it. That's right.
Hi.
Hi.
Thank you, that was really good. I currently work in-house in terms of marketing department, and I collaborate with the PR agency externally. Outside of the toolkit you presented, is there any other key information that you think an external team should know about the in-house company, if that makes sense?
Interesting question. The toolkit should have everything that you would ever send to a journalist in it. So in terms of, in a lot of my toolkits, they're on Dropbox actually, so that my clients, so kind of works for in-house agency. So if you have it in a kind of an accessible format, and then every press release that they're sending out will be in that folder. So making sure that also it works for if someone joins the team and they don't know what's been said in the past, it's kind of makes it less awkward for them when they're asking questions and you're like, oh, we solved that in 2 months ago. So putting all the kind of latest press releases in that kind of Dropbox really helps. I'm trying to rack my brains now. What else? Another thing I would say is keeping up to date with agencies about which angles they're working with and because I think the difference, having worked in agency, you're kind of trying to prove your fee and trying to come up with loads of different angles. And then you might get a bite of something and you'll go to the client and you'll be like, look, we've got this. And the client will be like, I hate that angle, we're not talking about that. So making sure that there's a way of just chatting through what they're actually working on without sounding like you're micromanaging them. Good luck. But yeah, making sure that you have that kind of transparency as to angles. Yeah, I think that's my full answer.
Thank you. That's great.
Hi, Florence. Thank you. That's really helpful. I've been scribbling lots of notes. My question is in 2 parts as well. I think a lot of people in the room have probably been in the same position where we've put out a press release and the journalist or publication has taken a different angle on it, possibly a negative angle on it. My first part of the question is do you have any tips to try and ensure that they take the angle that you want them to? And the second part of the question is, if they don't, any tips on how to damage control that?
Yeah, my favourite crisis comms question. So the first one is just, I think the worst case scenario is that you sell something in and actually the journalist then uncover something that you weren't aware of. And that has happened more times than I can even bear to imagine. So I think my first point would be make sure that when you sign said press release off, you've spoken to every director, especially if it's a slightly tricky situation. You've spoken to the directors and you know the full story, because once you know the full story, you can kind of mitigate what they don't need to know. But having that really open and honest conversation and saying, actually, I will sell this in, but is there anything that's slightly shady that we should know about? When journalists go behind your back and to kind of pull stuff out, the worst thing you can do is call them and kick up a fuss and tell them to remove it. And that works for everything, actually. I think one of the big watch outs in PR is if they don't use the right image that you want as a brand, it's actually almost better just to suck it up and just say, look, it was an image in our brand kit, but it's not ideal. For crisis comms, I would also say never say no comment, never be unavailable for comment. I mean, unavailable for comment is much better than no comment. No comment shows that you've got something to hide. So if something does go wrong, I think we see it quite a lot actually now in press that brands are almost more well respected when they just put their hands up, and that's something that's really happened over there. Definitely during the pandemic, people have got a bit more personable, and they know that stuff goes wrong. So there's kind of 2 sides to it. I would say you can, if it gets picked up and it goes in a whirlwind, try to mitigate it with kind of a slightly positive comment, but not giving too much away, not putting your head in the sand. When it goes, once you've kind of done that and everything passes, and I feel like this is one of the biggest things that you'll find. I feel like it's just now water off a duck's back, but stuff passes in like 2 weeks. People don't care about it normally. And then you can just pump out some positive stuff. But what I would say again is really watch out doing like, we raised X amount for charity, because that's kind of, people will be like, well, no, you actually, you screwed someone over 2 weeks ago, so we know about that. So don't try and make it too obvious, but some positive stuff, growth of the team, and anything like that, but just give it some time. And yeah, if something does come out, kind of an issue that needs crisis comms, sit on it for a bit, because most of the time it won't be as bad as when you first read it. People are very good at kind of jumping to conclusions on pieces and headlines. We've got Cornwall Live, which is almost like the bane of everyone's life in Cornwall, apparently. But they love a weird headline, but it's clickbait. What you also have to remember is that they've got targets. They literally have targets for how many clicks they get and how long they spend reading on a page. And I think once you kind of have that grounding, no article's actually going to be that horrific if the headline's just bad. But having said that, if it is, kind of try and mitigate it slightly with we're doing something about it. Put your hands up if it is something that's gone wrong. Put your hands up. It sounds so straightforward, but actually a lot of companies just kind of bury their heads in the sand or try and deflect.
Right. I think we're bang on time there, because I can hear everyone moving around. Round of applause, please, for Florence.